Says, even if stepping back made sense, don't teams use the money they save in stepping back to build the trenches, not just take on a bunch of mid to below mid jags at other positions? Yes. When it comes to taking a step back, Cody Dad, I think that there's not there's not an exact way every team would take that step back. It would be this team taking this step back this year. I think, Cody Dad, if there was not the assembly of picks in this draft in day 2 for the Hawks, multiple second rounders, multiple third rounders, if this was not a draft, Cody Dad, where there was as many good offensive linemen in that second, third round range, I think that there would have been more of a draw than to maybe paying for one of these offensive linemen. But because it is a step back, when you're paying for these offensive linemen and you're paying for guys that might be a risk, or a guy wants a 5th year like Freeze, you're really making that move because you do then partly believe that then 2025 is going to be potentially kind of the year that you could do and go out there and make noise in 2025. And the big and most important part of stepping back on this, Cody Dad, in my opinion, if we're saying that this is what the team's doing, is that you're saying, we want to compete in 25. We're going to try to do some things, but we're not going to go as hard as we've gone in prior years to contend in 2025. That there's going to be a bit of a sight line towards 26 with this. And that means that we're not looking then as a kind of as a motivation, a priority point to put a bunch of money on the books for 26 and 27. And offensive line would be included in that. All these deals they've given out, Cody Dad, when you look at it from the Cup deal to Lawrence to Darnold even, these are all deals that you can get out after 1 year if you wanted to. And they have so much cap space next year that if they have to eat some dead money to get out from these deals, a little bit of dead money, they're still going to have just a Scrooge McDuck vault of cash to go out there and spend on free agents for 26 and 27, or to spend on their own guys in-house, or to make trades for guys that you can spend money for. So you're still in a really good position at that point. But no, I think you'd want to invest in those trenches, but you'd want the quality there, and you'd want to be certain of that quality if you're taking that step back. Meaning, Cody Dad, that it wouldn't be about 25. It'd be that I'm getting a lineman for this year's free agent period that I know then in 26 is still going to be here, still going strong. Is Joe Thuney going to still be here in 26 going strong and good? Tevin Jenkins with his injury history and what's going on with his medical and that? Kind of hard to say. Will Freeze, who didn't want to have a physical, that you're on a 5-year contract, who's only had 4 or 5 games of really decent play. That's where I think that there just wasn't those items to give you that certainty for 26. So you would have, I think, maybe Kodak, but it would have had to have been with the knowledge that you knew these guys were going to be there and be good and going strong in 26 if you rolled with that. I mean, even the Colts center that went to the Vikings is 32-year-old player. Another guy you'd be going, I don't know. He might be out after a year. He might be done after a year. Cody Dad says, I think we are closer to competing, maybe not for a Super Bowl than you do, but now we're closer to a losing season than a winning one, have different views of what stepping back looks like. So for me, the step back is merely through the lens, Cody Dad, of contending, like you say, for a Super Bowl. So you have, I think you have your teams that are in the states of coming into a season and you're like, well, if things all work out really well this year, we'll slip into the playoffs kind of right at the end, just kind of get in there. Maybe we'll even win a game in the playoffs, get some heat started for the next year, right? I think that the team in taking the step back this year right now, Cody Dad, has the potential of having that kind of year. But when I look through the lens of how do we get to a contending state? What does it take to get to a contending state? How do you have to set the cap up right to get to a contending state? How does your line got to be to a contending state? Where do your quarterback position at to get to a contending state? When I take all of that into account, I didn't see coming into this offseason a team that signing DK Metcalf and Geno Smith to the monster contracts they would have, not going in out then and having the money to sign in free agency then, having to rely fully on the draft then for the linemen to make it happen. I just didn't see that team. While I saw them being potentially coded out in a place that could get to playoffs and maybe even win a game in the playoffs, not to Super Bowl. And if that's the case, as I say, I'm always wholly driven by getting the Super Bowl. Being kind of better than mediocre, just getting the playoffs, that's not worth a whole hell of a lot to me. It's nice. It's good to happen. It's not a bad thing, but it is a bad thing if it comes at ultimately the cost of not driving certainly towards the lane of being a contending team. And I'm really onto this, Cody Dad, because when I look at the last 10 years, I think that's been the part that's been missing, is that you have self-identified yourself wrongly as a team every given year. You've allowed that to then inform the moves that you would make. You sacrifice from the future for today then in account to do that, thus making it the future harder to get that contending status. So this is why when I wind this back then to saying why I didn't want to go as much hard on let's have to go drive for these offensive linemen right now and spend for them and that this is the biggest thing that's got to have happen. It's driven by that. It's pulled by that. It's trying to correct the ways and what you've gotten wrong the past 10 years, fix where you're wrong, stay with the things that you're getting right, lean on those, but fix where you were wrong. And where you were wrong was constantly looking at yourself thinking that you're better than you actually are. Because that's what they've done, Cody Dad, for the last 10 years. And this is not debatable. This is not a topic. I have both the head coach and I have the general manager, Every year for a 10-year period, anytime they had an interview and they were asked about that, and every interview they ask them, how do you see your team? Where's the outlook of your team? Where are you guys standing this year? Are you ready? We're ready to contend. We see ourselves as contender. We can contend this year. And that was both coach and that was general manager saying that. Now, is there a little bit of that's what they're going to tell? Yeah, I mean, in general, that's what a coach and general manager are going to say, but they're also going to, set expectations appropriately. And I think that they believed it. And I think that the proof that they believed it, Codadad, was in those moves that they pulled from the future for today. The giving a second round pickup for a Leonard Williams at a trade deadline deal move, right? That's not an indicator of, we know we're not really ready to contend this year, but we're just, we're going to try to do as much as we kind of can. We think we can contend with this guy. He's going to help take us over the top. So misidentification of your team for a 10-year period has been the biggest problem, even above offensive line. Bad as offensive line has been, Codadad, this has been a bigger problem for this team over this 10-year period. Every single season, you can't seem to identify properly where your team really is at as far as the pecking order of the NFL. You think you're up here, you're more kind of about right here. And so this is where I wanted to see the course correction in that step back this offseason. You take the step back. You don't necessarily, Codadad, completely bail out on 25. It's not that you're tanking for Arch Manning. I'm joking about that a little bit, but you're not doing that. There's a way this team could come together and coalesce and everything just kind of works out in the right way that they go out there and they could become that team. But you're not counting on it. You're not going to pull from the future cap space to make it happen. It's got to happen kind of organically and naturally if it's going to be. And that's where I'm advocating for in the step back. That's where I see it. So I think we're kind of similar in overall and where we may see the team with that, by and large with it. But it's that separating point of fringe playoff team, contender. I think that there's a big difference between those two slots of things. And I think we're in this slot right now rather than the contender slot. And then that informs your moves going into a 25 offseason about how aggressive you are, whether you go out there and go get that offensive lineman for big money, or whether you just kind of remain a little bit patient in your process, a little bit of a kick the can to 26 when it comes to how you spend your money a bit. But that's just kind of where I sort of see it on that.